What's up, guys? Welcome back. Looks like a fair number of you really enjoyed our last foray into this subject, and I'm glad to be shooting another video in this series. Based on a lot of comments we got from the last video, it seems like a bunch of you guys want deeper dives, and I just wanted to let you know, note that this video is meant to be an overview of each spirit, quick and dirty. But for those of you who want deeper dives into categories or brands or what have you, we're doing that on our second channel, Free Pour, so just check it out over there. Okay, today we are going to be talking about whiskey and rum, two spirits which I hear a lot of confusion about on the internet, so I don't know. Without further ado, let's get into it. There's a lot of whiskey out there, and this probably needs to be its own episode, but today we're just going to try and break this down super quickly. And then the very first whiskey that we're going to be talking about is, of course, because we're in America, bourbon. Bourbon is a style made only in the United States and must be made from 51% corn at minimum. The rest of the mash bill is typically wheat or rye and a small amount of barley. It can be distilled to no higher than 160 proof, put in the barrel at no higher than 125 proof, and it must be aged in new charred oak barrels. The flavor varies bourbon to bourbon depending on many different factors, but common flavors that you'll find in each bottle would be like maple, vanilla, caramel, definitely oak. It can be made anywhere in the United States, not just Kentucky, although I'd say that the majority is made in Kentucky. So for those of you that think it needs to be made in Kentucky, you're wrong. Next style up is rye. Rye is the very first American whiskey, a style which popped up in the northern states, most notably Pennsylvania and Maryland, although it can be made, again, anywhere in the United States. And the rules for rye are basically the same as bourbon, but then just switch it to rye grain. It must have a mash bill of at least 51% rye, and then the rest is essentially the same as bourbon. Its flavor is very similar to bourbon, especially if it has corn in its grain makeup, and most do, but it is much breadier, drier, and spicier on the palate. Next up is Tennessee whiskey. Tennessee whiskey style is very close to bourbon, and in fact, many Tennessee whiskeys legally qualify as bourbon. What separates this whiskey is that it must be made in Tennessee, and it undergoes what is known as the Lincoln County process. This is a process of filtering the whiskey through sugar maple charcoal to mellow it. The idea behind this is that the filtering removes impurities and smooths out the flavors. Next, we have single malt whiskey. Single malt whiskey refers to a whiskey made from one single distillery and using one malted grain. There are several different countries that make single malts, such as America, Ireland, and Japan, but of course the most popular is Scotch. So we have here an American one, we have an Australian one here, and then of course we have some Scotch. Scotch is not all single malt. Single malt Scotch is very popular, but there are blended Scotches and then there are single malt Scotches. Which brings us to Scotch. Scotch is a whiskey produced in Scotland, which is made chiefly from malted barley. It was actually only made with malted barley until about the 1700s. Nowadays, distillers use cereal grains and wheat in its mash bill. The most thought of flavor profile when it comes to this style of whiskey is smokiness, which is often imparted into the whiskey from the process of drying the malt over peat fires. But smokiness isn't really a prerequisite to Scotch, and not all are smoky. There are 5 different Scotch regions: Highland, Islay, Speyside, Lowlands, and Campbelltown. Each of these regions make their own unique version of the spirit. All of them are good. You should buy one of each of those and compare and contrast the different flavor profiles because they are all amazing. Highly recommended. Irish whiskey is most often made from unmalted barley. Most are blends, but they do make some single malts as well. The flavor profile is very light with a relatively short finish, although pot still offerings definitely up the flavor game when it comes to Irish whiskey. And there are some outliers in this category, such as this Waterford here, which is peated. And the last category that we're talking about is Japanese whiskey. Japanese whiskey is largely modeled after Scotch, so generally speaking, it is made from malted barley and aged in wood barrels. The wood casks differ distiller to distiller, but it can include ex-bourbon casks, ex-sherry casks. They do it in white oak or Spanish oak casks. Some distillers use wood native to Japan for their casks, such as Mizunara, creating flavor profiles you'll only get in Japanese whiskey. And to put a little button on the end of our whiskey tutorial, you will notice when you go to the store that sometimes whiskey is spelled without an E and sometimes it is spelled with an E. So for those whiskeys that are distilled in the United States and Ireland, they spell it W-H-I-S-K-E-Y. And then for Japan, Canada, and Scotland, they spell it without an E. Now we're gonna switch gears from the neat and tidy world of whiskey and talk about rum. Rum is a difficult spirit to give a short overview on, as it's a complicated and extremely diverse category, and the classification system historically put in place, such as categorizing rums by color, is just a plain bad system. Rum is just too variable to be able to be described in such simple terms. Even rum that comes from the same region can have massive differences in flavor, even if they look the same. So simply put, rum is a spirit that is made by distilling fermented sugarcane and usually aging the distillate in oak barrels. The sugarcane can come from molasses, which is the byproduct of sugar production, evaporated cane juice, or fresh cane juice. 90% of the world's rum is molasses-based because molasses doesn't spoil, so companies can distill year-round and anywhere in the world. The other 10% is sugarcane juice-based. Some examples of these would be Haitian Clarin, rum agricole from Martinique, or Charanda from Mexico. Although this is slowly starting to change, there are very few rules from region to region regarding how certain styles are made. This makes for a massively diverse category of spirits, probably the most diverse in the world, which makes it really hard to classify in any way that's simple to understand, although we are going to try in this video. The raw materials used to make the rum as well as climate play a crucial role in its aging process and how the end product comes out. So there are two modern approaches that attempt to classify rum. One is called the flavor map, which was developed by Spiridom, which is a joint venture between leading rum brands from Guadeloupe, Rum Demiso, and Martinique, and Rum Clement and Rum JM, founded in 2005. The flavor map breaks rum styles down by region. These regions are English, Spanish, and French styles, and each of these styles correspond to different descriptors on the map. I guess it kind of hits at it because different rums from similar regions favor similar production methods, but the approach is way too broad. So the second one is called the Gargano classification system. This approach was created by master distiller Richard Seal in Barbados and Luca Gargano of the Vellier Import Company. This approach classifies rum by production method only and is possibly the best way to do it. I don't know. Marius and I have been having a lot of arguments about whether or not this is the best way to do it. But the rum categories are pure single rum, which is 100% molasses batch pot distillation, pure single agricole rum, right? So cane juice, 100% batch pot still distillation, single blended rum, which is a blend of 100% traditional column and pot still rums, traditional rum, which is traditional 100% column still distillation, modern rum, which is modern industrial multi-column distillation, and then we'll just say that pure equates to 100% pot still rum, and single is just 100 single distillery rum. Also, not many bottles mention production methods on them, so being able to decipher rum to rum is going to require a little homework. But to make that homework a little bit easier, and because Marius and I had such a long talk about this, and really this is going to be a massive oversimplification of the subject, I just want to talk about distillation methods. There are two methods of distillation, pot still and column still. Pot stills are a large pot-looking still, surprise, surprise, with a long horse's neck at the end where the distillate comes out. They are historically heated by a direct fire, although many modern systems use hot steam to be able to have more control over the process so that they don't burn the wash. Pot still rums are by and large going to produce more flavorful rum than column stills, which produce much more potent but less flavorful distillates. This is because pot stills create a distillate with more congeners. Congeners are chemicals produced during fermentation that are not ethanol. These include esters, acetone, acetaldehyde, I think I'm not pronouncing that correctly, and tannins. These chemicals are largely responsible for the flavor and aroma in distilled spirits. So column stills are designed to make a much higher proof and purer distillate because they allow for continuous distillation. They yield much more volume and can put out spirits of up to 96% alcohol. A column still looks just like that, a massive column which contains lots of different levels, and as the fermented wash makes its way through the column, it distills and redistills so that the wash works its way through the column and it gets stronger and stronger. But it also loses more and more of those flavor and aroma containing congeners, making a more neutral flavored rum. So where does this leave us? When Marius and I were talking through this episode, he was very confused about everything that I kind of wanted to talk about, and it really didn't leave you with the same satisfaction that like whiskey does. Like when you're talking about bourbon, bourbon is made from 51% corn and then the rest can be this and that. It has to be aged in this particular cask. It has to be made in the United States. And so you get from bourbon to bourbon a lot of nuance, but you also get a lot of similarities. And that's just not true for rum. And I hope that I didn't completely confuse you guys with this video, but it is a very hard Question. Marius, I think, would have been more satisfied if it was like, Jamaican rums have Jamaican funk because they have higher ester counts, which is true. The problem with that is that there's a lot of other styles of rum that taste just like Jamaican rum and aren't Jamaican rum. So, Marius, what are we, how do we simply categorize rum? Are we gonna rock the rum world now? No, we're gonna have to do a rum episode. I'm gonna have to take a deep dive. I'm gonna have to talk to Matt Pietrek, obviously. Yeah, I hope you guys learned something on this video, and I'll see you guys on another time. I think I've done enough talking for today, though. I'm gonna go drink some honey and lemon and be quiet for a while.